to order the meeting of the Arlington Finance Committee. First order of business is the minutes. Are there any corrections, comments, or questions about the minutes as presented?
I have a fistful of them from Mary Margaret.
Okay. I just have one. On the second page, under Article 37, voted, second line, commissions as last year, except for changes already voted for. HC, put a comma, AHRC and a requested reduction.
I'm sorry, Al, I didn't quite catch up with you. Could you start over?
Article 37.
Yeah.
The next line is voted.
The next line is,
Commissions. Go to the end of that line.
I don't see the voted. It's one down at the bottom of the paragraph.
Okay, Article 37, commissions and committees of the
Oh,
body.
yes, okay. There's several.
Okay, and then the next line starts off with commissions. You got that? This is on the second page.
Oh, the second page, all right. Got Article
Joe, grab a chair.
I'm with you now.
Okay, go to the end of that line where it says already voted for HRC.
Move over and give Joe Barlow.
So put a comma after HC,
No?
and then
Oh, you're gonna say- okay.
AHRC, add to the end of that, and a requested reduction for Vision 2020. Okay, are there any other corrections?
Do you want to read the figure? Does it matter, or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay. Under the Council on Aging, the hours by the town are 6, but from the state is 18. And I also suggested to make the Health and Human Services budget about the rodent control less graphic, and just say that I reported that the rodent line item will pay for more expansive effort, and forget the other stuff. And the mosquito control effort will continue, period. Let's see, what else did I say? Oh, the code transportation thing, maybe I didn't make that clear. The training line item isn't new, it's just that it's only done every other year, so it's only expense done every year.
Okay.
And I don't have yet the corrected, the spreadsheet that was done with the pie chart. The numbers on the spreadsheet are correct, but the pie chart isn't. And so Christine will get us another one. And then under Rec and Rink, I just changed it slightly to noted that salaries have been paid from the revolving fund, but will now be accounted for in the enterprise fund. And how the budget is presented or organized has changed significantly. I just need it shorter.
Okay. Any other corrections or changes? Okay. All those in favor of accepting the minutes as corrected, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, minutes are done. Next order of business is the Capital Planning Committee, to which I will turn over to its chairman, Mr. Foskett.
Thank you, Alan. So, good evening, folks. So, first of all, this is a preview of the report that we'll be providing the town meeting, and we're asking for your support tonight. First of all, I'd like to introduce you to the members that are here. Brian Rarig, I think you know from prior meetings. Dean Carmen, you probably can't remember, but he used to come a lot to our meetings. Nice to see you back, Dean, again. Michael Morris on my left is the deputy treasurer, who actually runs the treasurer's department. Sandy Pooler, as you know, is the deputy town manager. Chris Moore is a new member of the Capital Planning Committee. Barbara Thornton has been on for a long, long time. And Joe Barr is a new advisory member, and we'll talk more about that under one of the articles in the warrant, but we hope to see Joe as a permanent member later this year. On page 2 is a page, I'll talk about big page 2 here. Just a brief agenda. And the full list of the committee members: John Denizio is the school department chief financial officer. He couldn't make it tonight. And Timur Yantur also wasn't able to make it tonight. And Amy Fidalgo, who's the management analyst and does most of the work on the committee, is actually in graduate school at the current time. And the comptroller position is vacant. As you know, Rich Fisquet resigned from his comptroller position earlier this year. On page 3 is a committee organization. Many of you have seen this before. It's fashioned after the model of the Finance Committee, where we use subcommittee members who pretty much stick with the departments that they investigate and support. And that way we build up some institutional knowledge about each of the departments as the years go by. And the distribution of the people for these different departments are shown on slide 5 on page 3. I won't read them, but on slide 6 is a list of the items that we'll be discussing tonight. For those of you who are new to the committee, to the Finance Committee, I just wanted to make a couple of comments about why we do capital planning. There's a list of them here on page 4, but I think the most important, there are 2 important characteristics of the capital planning committee and I think the value that we bring to the town. First of all, we encourage the department managers and the executives in the town to plan ahead with a 5-year horizon, which is important. I don't know if any of you were around in town meeting before the capital planning started to work for the town, but we used to fight for hours over typewriters and things like that on the floor of town hall, and it's improved a little bit since then. And and secondly, and most importantly, and this is a very important contribution of the Finance Committee, is that we give a sense of, let me call it certainty or comfort to the town managers and the executives that if they have something in the capital plan, and if they've been good enough to postpone gratification and accept that it's going to come in 4 or 5 years, they have a reasonable certainty that they're going to get it at some point. And if you remember, if you think about this, that by and large, the town is, the Capital Planning Committee and Town Meeting and Finance Committee are buying either infrastructure, buildings, or tools and equipment for the people that work in the town. These are the tools, these are the support that the workers in the town use to provide services to the citizens. So it's very important that they have some comfort that their resources are going to be renewed, and when technology moves on, that they're going to be able to keep up with the latest technology. You'll hear tonight about the 5% of revenue budget. Bob O'Neill, our late chairman of the Finance Committee many years ago, agreed with John Billifer, who was then treasurer, that we would reserve 5% of the operating budget, the non-exempt operating budget, for capital spending, and we've stuck to that over the years. And as you'll see in the discussion tonight, that turns out to be a guide or a throttle on what we spend. So with those comments, I'd like to turn the floor over to Sandy Pooler, who on page 5 will discuss program progress and things that have been completed or in process and in prior capital plans, and then a couple of other items that are in a little bit more detail. Sandy.
Evening, everybody. I want to make sure everybody has everybody has a handout. So what I thought I would been asked to do is just talk about the progress of capital projects and some of the things that we have either completed or improvements that we've realized recently, and then talk about the capital projects that are in process now. So on the left-hand side, there are a variety of projects sort of ongoing. There are things like roads and sidewalks. I did not bring a list of every single road that's being repaired, but I think you know that that is a key part of the capital plan, that we set aside about $500,000 every year from one of the last overrides to continue to do road work, plus whatever Chapter 90 money we have to make improvements to the roads and sidewalks. Water improvement, we replace about 30,000 linear feet of pipe every year. They have most recently done work on Bow Street this year, and in the coming year, they're working on Mill Street. We're also about 45% of the way through changing out the water meters. That is a multi-year project, but it will ensure that we get accurate readings so we can accurately bill our customers. The other big DPW project in this last year was changing the signalization in town center. You will see a picture of that in the manager's financial plan when that comes out at the end of the month. So I think Adam is very proud, and so is Mike Rademacher, of the work they've done there. And I think anecdotally, there's evidence that it has increased flow through the town center and meant less queuing for traffic along there. The Thompson School addition is done, the Stratton School is completely renovated, and the community safety buildings are all completed. Within community safety, there are still some projects that would identify not as the main part of the construction project, but sort of ancillary to that. Some with the HVAC system in this building that we are still holding some money back to review with the new facilities director about what other things need to be done to make sure that the building is in optimum working shape. We recently purchased a new ambulance, and as you saw from the very first picture, we recently, and I mean literally this week, took delivery of the new fire tower. So that is in town getting ready to be used. This last year, because of money that town meeting appropriated, we did do we did a whole audit of all of our playgrounds and made some major improvements and safety upgrades there. And also within the recreation area, we erected fencing around the back street near Summer Street so that softballs and baseballs would not go through the plate glass window of the restaurant that's across the street there, which before the fencing was there, used to happen all the time. We try not to do those sort of things if we can help it. Currently, in addition to sort of the ongoing road and water and sewer improvements that I referred to, as many of you know, we're in the midst of kind of gutting and renovating the Gibbs School, so they'll be ready in September for the sixth graders to attend. That is on schedule right now. The high school study is going at a full bore. Brian and I are both on that committee, and they're doing a lot of the preliminary studies on the education needs, what the education program is, which is the basis for what MSBA uses to determine its reimbursement. They want to look first at your education plan, see how many classrooms you need and so forth. They have a sort of generic template that they use throughout the state. And then there's a certain amount of minor tweaking that can go on community by community. So if a community, for example, has a more SPED program or a language arts program or a theater program, you can, within certain parameters, tweak those things with the state and still be reimbursed for it. So there's a lot of public process going on there. There have been tours of the high school and other public forums where people have participated and shared their views, with the idea of coming out with a preferred design, a preferred solution this spring, to send to the MSBA and then sort of finalize that in August with a vote at the MSBA for what direction we want to go in. We put out bids on, I think it was Monday that they finally went out for a new VoIP phone system. We have an ancient phone system. If you've ever seen it, it's about the size of two of these tables put together and this high. Nothing electronic looks like that anymore. So with a new, basically internet-based phone system, we will have a modern phone system. It should save us some cost in the long run and operate better. And we just put out the bids on Monday to look at contractors who are already approved by the state to come in and install that system. DPW building design is going on now. We probably won't really know anything for sure about where they're going with that until sometime early summer, but the architects and the project manager have been hired. We've ordered a new pumper, so that should be coming in a few months. The Mystic Street Bridge right now, they're dealing with a lot of issues around the foundation, and they expect construction to start on that by the end of the summer. Within recreation, there's also CPA money being used to upgrade Robbins Farm Park. There's kind of extensive redo of that whole area, of many of the fields and play areas. And then the second to last one is Munis financial software upgrades and expansions, which is near and dear to my heart because the things that we've done there are things that I work with every single day, and those of us on the finance team work with every single day. Mike and I are going to talk about what some of those things are. I'm going to ask Mike to start off first with the things listed below on the Munis status support upgrade, because most of them have to do with things that directly involve his department, and then I'll wrap up with some of the things that are more town-wide. So, Mike.
Thank you, Sandy. So in September of 2016, we began the process of converting property and motor vehicle excise tax from ICS, which was the town's homegrown collection system developed in the 80s, to Munis. In May of 2017, we went live on those tax types. In July, we went live on tax deferral, and then in October, we went live on tax title. We're still ongoing with parking, and we've yet to begin water, but that'll be coming beginning this fiscal year as well. As part of the conversion, we updated the online payment system for those tax types as well to Invoice Cloud. A few new features with Invoice Cloud: auto pay, schedule payments. If you know you're going to be out of town and the bill is due, you can just set it up to pay. You can click and forget about it. Probably the most sought after and well past due feature we've had is the option to allow for paperless billing. This way you can opt out of getting a paper bill for your tax types and just get an email whenever a bill is due, as well as an email reminder if you have still not yet paid that invoice. We've opened this up to other departments as well. So the school department is currently on Invoice Cloud. HHS is currently in development mode for that. And the town clerk's office will also be on it, so you can pay licenses and permitting fees by the end of the calendar year as well. Tyler Cashiering is the new point of sale system we have in town. The old process was a little inefficient, for lack of a better word. If someone came in with a payment, we'd collect it at the window, and then we'd take that payment and pass it to the back office to process into ICS. Now the cashiers themselves can take that payment, enter it into the system, and in real time hit the system to show that it has been paid. You also get a nifty little receipt that shows the date and time and the actual amount paid, as opposed to just a stamped thing saying that we took in payment. The wands piece of it is to improve efficiency. The cashiers can just take the bill, scan it with a wand, and all the information displays, showing any outstanding invoice. So again, that can help the lines move a little bit quicker. Cash management, this implementation is currently ongoing. This will allow us to import the bank activity and then compare that directly to the GL. It's kind of like reconciling your checkbook, but online. So that'll be a nice feature just to have everything to be imported and do away with Excel sheets and everything offline. It'll be online for anyone to view at any time. One other aspect was the departmental 910 forms. So what would happen is if a department had a deposit to make, they would put it on an Excel sheet, bring us the cash, we would take that payment. We would then enter it into ICS, take that payment, deposit it at the bank, and then we'd give an invoice to the comptroller's office, and then they would take that payment and enter it into Munis. So the same transaction being entered in 3 times. Now the departments themselves enter it into Munis, they bring it to us, we verify the amount they entered in, we click accept, and then that gets sent to the comptroller's office. They verify the GL accounts are correct, they hit accept, and it's done. No more 3 different parties entering it in. This will cut down on a lot of mistakes being made, or just the potential for mistakes to be made. Now Sandy will finish up the last few items.
If I can
when we-
interrupt just 1 second?
Certainly.
I have to say, the other day, Sandy and Michael gave, and Dean gave some of us on the finance committee a demonstration of the system. And if they'll let you, and you get a chance, take a look. It's really slick. I like it.
Excellent.
Please, anytime, come on by.
As part of sort of changing the philosophy and the structure of how we do things, we've decentralized a lot of functions out of, just say, the treasurer's office into the various departments. So now departments can pay invoices and take payments and enter them directly into Munis without having to bring a whole box of things over to a central office and have somebody wait to wade through it. So we think it makes sense to do it there, and it's more efficient. The next thing I want to talk about is Tyler Content Manager, which is basically a way of getting rid of a lot of useless paper. Right now, every time we create a purchase order or certain checks, or we take in checks, we can scan them, and it creates a permanent picture of those things, which are then attached to whatever the appropriate electronic record is. So it's everything from, as I say, a purchase order, when somebody creates that, and you then want to go into the budget system and then, let's say, see what somebody bought out of their budget. You can actually go and see the exact purchase order. It's probably even more important when you're looking at a vendor calling up and having a question about payment and or delivery of goods, for somebody at the department level to be able to see the exact purchase order that was sent to that vendor, so there's no question about did we order 15 or 20 of these goods. We're also, those things are now automatically generated by Munis when we create a purchase order. The other thing that's automatically generated right now are basically electronic pictures of the payroll, of the individual pay notices that go to all our employees. And what that is going to mean is getting to our next level here called Employee Self-Serve, which we rolled out on March 1st. So employees can go in. Each employee now has a unique login that he or she can use at work or from home. You can use it anywhere. And you can look at pictures of your paychecks. So if you need to show paychecks to the bank when you're getting a mortgage to show what your last 5 paychecks or something like that, you can just sit at the computer at home, print those out, bring it to your bank, it's done. You can also get access to your W-2s. So if you're doing your taxes and you lost what was sent to you in the mail or delivered to your office, that's going to be right there. It also has features that allow somebody to do a simulation on their check to say, if I were to change the amount that is deducted from my paycheck each week, either for tax purposes or because I want to put more money or less money into my 457 plan, which is the governmental equivalent of a 401k. That will then roll out and show whether what's going to happen to the bottom line at your take-home pay. You can also decide and change your status from married to single or single to married. So if you want to see how that affects your bottom line, it's just a click of a button. Eventually, we will also allow people to go in and change their W-4s. So not just do a simulation, but actually make those changes. That information will then be sent electronically to the HR department. They will verify those changes before they're in Munis. There are other features like that, such as if we want to, say, put out a employee sexual harassment policy. We can post it in employee self-serve, tell people to look at it there, have them click that they have looked at it, and then we have a notice and a record of everybody who has seen it so that we can fulfill our legal obligations to make sure those things are distributed. All those things are coming, but as I say, employee self-serve is here, and I am happy to report that at a recent meeting when a citizen criticized the expenditure of money on Munis, which employee self-serve is part of, one of our union presidents spoke exceedingly enthusiastically about employee self-serve because he thought it would really make a huge difference to him and to his members to be able to have access to this information. And to me, that's a huge win. We're also rolling out Munis to all the principals and their administrative staff. We right now have it up and running in the high school, and with a few technical changes to the whole network, which are necessary because quite frankly, in the old days, nobody thought that the individual schools were going to need access to our central financial system. So they set it up so they couldn't get access to that and built walls to prevent it. Now we realize it's an essential part of running a school, and we're having to take down those walls. But I think it is, I just mentioned that because a lot of this stuff is a real change in how people think about doing business in the town. And making this a more modern, efficient, and user-friendly system. If I could go to the next slide, please. I know this is a little hard to see, but recently we conducted training. Patty Sawtell, who used to work in HHS and this last year moved over to the IT department and has been our real Munis guru and has been in charge as the project manager of all the things that we've been talking about. She's worked with me and Mike and all the departments to help transition us through this process. And one of the other key things she's responsible for is training. So a couple of weeks ago, she held a training, 4 sessions in one day, a total of 45 different participants, looking at and upgrading people's skills in Munis. So these are all of the frontline day-to-day clerks who are using this, in addition to certain department heads or middle managers, just continue to hone their skills. And after it, she sent out a SurveyMonkey survey to them and asked them what they thought were the important topics for them and what they'd like to see more of in the future. And I know these are a little hard to read, but I thought it was very interesting that people were very interested in things like data searches. That's the middle kind of goldish bar on the left. What that tells me is they're hungry to be able to have access to more information. They want to be able to know how to find things in the system. I thought that was great. On the things that they want to learn more about are things like budget inquiry. And that was the highest one, and invoice processing was number 2. But that also tells me that instead of just waiting for somebody to deliver, say, a month-to-date or year-to-date budget report to you, to be able to go in on your own and look that information up and run your own report so that you know at any time what's going on with your budget and not rely on, as many people have in the past, somebody like the comptroller's office to deliver a paper copy of that to you. I think that's a sea change in thinking, and I hope through other parts of Munis that get more and more user-friendly, things like dashboards and so forth, we'll continue to educate the staff and the department heads and the frontline staff about how to be more connected with things like our budget, with our spending rates, with things like looking at vacation usage and sick leave usage and so forth and so on. We've made some huge strides to date, but there is still a lot to do and a lot to take advantage of this very powerful software. So I just have to give credit to the Capital Planning Committee in the past and the Finance Committee and town meeting to make the investments that we've had to make to upgrade these systems. And I think there's a lot of enthusiasm in the staff, which is great, and I think the reaction we've seen from the public in terms of better customer service has also been positive. So it's been a great move, and we look forward to keep moving on it.
Thank you, Sandy. Yeah, I think I recollect that we invested in this over 2 or 3 years, probably in the aggregate on the order of $600,000. And I'm glad to hear that it's paying off. So Sandy, do you want to sort of bring us up to date on how we reconcile to our plan, to the town plan, et cetera? Please.
Right, so the bottom of page 6, slide number 12, shows in these 4 lines how we get to what amount we're going to be targeting for the 5% rule on our capital spending. So the top line takes the budget, the total amount of revenue that is in the long-range plan. And we start with that, and then we subtract from there the amount that is in the budget, that is in the tax base for the MWRA water and sewer capital shift, because we don't want to take 5% of that for capital spending, because that's just a fixed amount. Similarly, the amount of exempt debt service through various debt exclusion overrides that have been on the ballot in the past and are now hitting the tax bill. We also take that out because, again, we're not trying to take 5% of that because that's all locked up for that purpose. And then we back out the money that's in the coming from the enterprise funds for their capital, because it's not general fund money, so we get a final number. I just want to note that going forward through FY21, the numbers here for revenue, well, actually definitely through FY20, the numbers are actual real numbers for what our spending would be. For FY21, 22, and 23, what we've put in the plan here is our anticipated revenue, assuming that we have a balanced budget. In other words, it's spending and revenues match each other. That, of course, will be reliant on our having an override sometime in the future in order to balance these numbers out. Because if you look at the revenues projections, and I'm sure you've all seen the long-term forecasts, starting in FY21, we start to see that our revenues don't match our expenditures. The conversations we're going to have about the override in capital planning and finance and long-range planning and so forth, in the select board and many other committees, is going to be an ongoing and important conversation to have in the coming year, and we're going to have to make some decisions about whether to have an override, when to have it, and how big it's going to be. And we discussed that within the committee, and we thought at this point it's premature to make any assumption about not having an override, so we kept the assumption about revenue in there to match what the anticipated expenses are, and that's what we're using to drive the 5%. So with that, I'm going to turn to the next page. This page, again, it looks out 5 years, including the current fiscal year, to see the total of all of the things at top that we're spending money on out of the general fund. So we start out with our non-exempt debt. In other words, debt that has not been excluded by Prop 2.5 debt override. So it's money that is coming out of our base tax base. The next line is the cash that we're spending. So again, the kind of things that we spend for maybe smaller short-term projects. new non-exempt debt service, so we know that there are things we're going to sell this year or in the coming years, and we built that in. Similarly, we know that there's some debt that we're going to sell that is long-term debt. We're going to sell that in the short term. And we know that there's some debt that we're going to sell as bands, which are bond anticipation notes. These are one-year instruments that then get paid off once you sell permanent long-term financing, but you have to account for the interest that we're going to pay, and that's what's on that line. Then in all the red, in this case, red is a good number. Usually for budget people, red is a bad number, but in this case, it's a very good number because that means there are other sources that we can use for our capital spending that take the burden off the general fund and off the taxpayers, but put it onto other sources. So there, for example, the first line, non-exempt bond premiums. When we sold debt this last year, we had a small premium. It was small enough that it was under $5,000, so we couldn't reduce the amount we were borrowing. So it was basically cash that was left over, so we're using that as a source. The Rink Enterprise Fund, we charged them half the cost of the debt service that went into the rink upgrades a number of years ago. The Ambulance Revolving Fund, either debt or cash expenditures that we are using to buy ambulance equipment. Certain capital carry forwards, these are the funds that were appropriated from in prior years for projects. Those projects have been completed. There's a balance left in those projects. So we can then close that out and basically reappropriate that. We don't have it go to free cash. We keep it within the realm of capital where it started, and we reappropriate that. The antenna funds, there are certain, particularly on the water tanks and a few other places where there are cell phone antennas, that money goes to help defray the cost of certain recreation capital improvements. The Urban Renewal Fund is the Urban Renewal Fund, and that pays for capital improvements mostly at places like the Central School, asset sale proceeds. We are anticipate. Well, is this still labeled correctly?
That's the remainder.
Oh.
Yeah, it is. It's still the remainder.
Of the assumed amount that we will have from selling the DAV building, which had been sort of in hiatus, but I am told that recently the owner has gotten going again, and I think that we will see some movement on that and actually see the sale in the next few months. The roadway reconstruction is what I referred to before. When the override passed in 2011, there was a promise that a percentage of that would be set aside for roadway reconstruction, and that is built into the plan every year, assuming a 2.5% increase as the tax base goes up to cover that. And then many years ago, we had some fairly significant bond premiums from 2016 that basically ended up as free cash at one point, and we are basically taking credit and spending those things down as an offset for our overall costs. You get through all that to a bottom line here in FY19, $7.4 million. You then compare that to this $148 million as from the previous page. Take 5% of that, which is $7,438,000, which means that we are spending just under 5% in FY19 on capital, 4.98%. We're actually short of that number of the 5% by $29,830. That's like horseshoes and hand grenades, close enough, it's good. That continues through all of the years. Some years are up and some years are down. In order to comply with the town's policies, really, what we want to see is that very last number in the bottom right-hand corner be 5% and have the amount. It's a $39,000 that we're underspending, but overall, you want to be better off underspending than overspending. So that is what we, and at $39,000 over 5 years on $40 million is a rounding error. So we're there where we need to be. So that's how we get to that. As FY19 is the rubber meets the road budget. This is actually a budget. All other years going forward are still a plan. And as FY20 becomes the rubber meets the road year, that will definitely have to be in balance. And we may move some things around, or things may come up in FY20 to eat up some of that 170,000 excess. Similarly, by the time FY21 rolls around, we will have had to have either moved things around or dropped other projects or postponed other projects, so that balances out. You can't have red in your current year. But that's why the future years are just a plan, and the target is to hit that 5% in the bottom right-hand corner.
Thank you, Sandy. Any questions about any of that? John?
Yes, Sandy, just the top line, the prior non-exempt debt, is that debt service from
prior debt sales, that's right. So, 10 years ago, we might have sold a 20-year bond, so we still have 10 more years of payments that we know to the penny what those payments are, and we track them. Or actually, Mike does as the treasurer.
Alan?
For our new members in the viewing audience, where did 5% come from, and why do we think that's the right number?
Well, as I alluded to earlier, it was an agreement between John Billifer, who was then treasurer. I'm going back 30 years now. And Bob O'Neill, who was then the chairman of the finance committee. And they looked around at spending in other towns. They looked at pro formas that had been published in various trade magazines and journals, and they picked 5%. And we have stuck with it ever since then, and it seems to work reasonably well.
So we have 30 years of experience saying it's a pretty good number.
We have 30 years of experience saying that we've stayed exactly at 5%.
Yeah. Well, and can I make one comment to the 5%? I think something that, if you even benchmark Arlington to a lot of communities that try to do capital planning, is outside of schools, we don't have a consistent habit of going for debt exclusions for capital projects. So if you look at some of our neighbors, when they have to redo police stations, fire stations, or any building, they have to have a debt exclusion. Whereas in Arlington, really the numbers, the debt exclusions are really reserved for the school building projects, because that's at the point where you're getting up into 20, 30 plus $1 million. And so I think if you look at the 50 million, it really does sustain all the capital, or almost all of the capital needs of the town. So thus proving out that it works.
Any other? Yes, John.
Munis sounds really wonderful, but I have one concern, which is hacking is now sort of the way that criminals do their bad things nowadays. And I'm wondering how vulnerable financially we are to hacking into Munis.
I can't really talk about that on camera.
Well, if you tell me that I really feel fine about that, then I feel better, okay?
Not that I'm aware that there are any real vulnerabilities, but I also think that is a question, unless Mike, you have anything you want to add, but really I would defer to the IT department to talk about the firewalls and anti-spam and things that they do, because we keep Munis within, in-house. It's not accessible generally from outside. So, but how they then shelter and do that is really an IT function. And so I would respectfully defer that question to the IT department.
Okay, well, maybe I'll pursue it.
Well, I would also say, though, that hacking at Munis isn't really, I think, what we would grade as a significant risk, because it's a ledger system, right? It's not a paper green bar paper system, but it's a glorified ledger system. All of your near, present, and immediate risk from cyber attacks and things like that are your bank accounts. I mean, and these aren't tied into your bank account. This meter system isn't tied into the bank account. So well, I think most of the risk and controls are still heavily weighted more towards where we bank and people's ability to access, withdraw money, things like that.
But doesn't Munis essentially do that, doesn't it?
No,
Munis is merely a ledger system, is what you're saying.
it is a ledger system, yep, and then the Munis accounting system will, Munis accounting system will then generate payables to push out. But your real risks still become your sort of, everyday brick and mortar schemes that you see, whether it's people taking fraudulent checks and presenting them at the bank, or people sending these phishing emails that are asking you to ACH or wire money to them immediately and things like that. And I think, I don't want to say we see, you don't see it every day, but it comes through the treasurer's office more than once with some issues, and it's the banking side controls that are set up to stop that from happening.
Thank you, Dean. Any other questions? Okay, so now I guess we'd like to move on to some of the more tangible items that are in this year's capital budget. Let me mention that in your package, there in larger type, there's a budget document for fiscal year 19. There's the 5-year plan, and there's also a schedule of non-exempt debt service, the prior debt service. So that if you're looking to, schedule of new debt service, and if you're looking to, correlate any of this information, it's on those 3 backup sheets. I also want to mention that the capital plan that you see before you get in these documents here is somewhat different, not materially, but somewhat different than the capital plan that the town manager put out back in at the end of December. That was published in his January report, because it does get modified and updated as we went through the first quarter in preparation for the Finance Committee and for town meeting. So on page 7, slide 14 is a summary of the items that we're going to talk about, and right away we'll turn over the community safety discussion to Brian Rearig and Chris. Brian.
Thanks, Charlie. So we're sitting in the first topic on this slide, which is the community safety building, which, as Dean mentioned, is one of the many assets that have been renovated in the last decade without the assistance of a debt exclusion. This police station and all of the fire stations have all been accomplished within the confines of the 5% capital plan. This one was a challenge, as I think everyone knows. It went on forever. It was a real burden on the department, which was in the end minimized by shrinking the number of phases involved and the disruption to them. In the end, it was a $12.5 million investment, all told. At the very end, there was a dispute with the contractor. It was resolved very favorably, I think, from the town's point of view, with a $100,000 settlement. We got back $466,000 from the appropriations that had been done to the project. $200,000 of that has been released and is part of the carry forward that Sandy mentioned. It's a line item that feeds the capital plan. The rest, the manager is holding for the moment for additional items that need to be done to this building that perhaps should have been included in the scope of work of this project, but weren't. So there may be some reappropriation of those funds that will be coming up before FinCom and town meeting. The requests in this year's capital plan include the usual cruiser fleet renewal and replacement program for LiDAR, which is the fancy new version of radar, as well as the radio system, which I'll talk about under fire in a second. The fire department, as Sandy mentioned, we've taken delivery of the fairly amazing new tower truck, which is pictured here and on the cover of our report. You're going to be seeing a lot of that because it's a great image. And the chief's very excited to be having that That is the first tower that Arlington has ever owned. A tower being a ladder with a platform on the end that more than one firefighter can work off of. A much more effective design. A couple of things that we're accelerating into this year, some deterioration of the bay floor at Park Circle, small amount of money moved up for that. There's also an issue with the self-contained breathing apparatus that the firefighters use. The filling station blew a gasket and oil was leaking into the oxygen reserve, if you can imagine it. And they had to use a borrowed unit from the vendor for a couple of weeks. So we've accelerated replacement of that compressor into fiscal 19. And replacing some fitness equipment. The fire department's requests this year are very modest, with the exception of the radio system, which you've heard about before. We reported on this last year. This is replacement of the entire emergency dispatch center system. It starts with a series of desktop computers that are downstairs in this building and which are running Windows XP, which is no longer supported. This project is somewhat overdue. It can't come soon enough because of the problems. What we reported to you last year was that the entire project would be done in fiscal 20. Because some new problems have developed with those PCs, the fire and police chiefs and their staffs have gotten together and asked us to accelerate a piece of it, the computers essentially, and everything that connects to them, into fiscal 19. So that's now a 2-year project again, accelerated into fiscal 19. Any questions on those?
So, Brian, the next...
Alan.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Alan, Steve.
I'm sorry.
You mentioned an issue with Park Circle.
Peeling. The surface of the concrete was spalling because of the, apparently because of the combination of salt and oil from the trucks. It wasn't actually, spalling's not correct because it wasn't eating into the concrete. It was only the protective layer that was starting to go. But we need to replace the protective layer to prevent the concrete from starting to spall.
I mean, it's pretty new. Is there any
It is,
warranty
it
issues?
is pretty new. No, barely outside warranty.
8 years.
No, brand new.
Steve had a question too.
Steve, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, John. Brian, on the vehicle replacement for the police, how many vehicles are included in the 131,000?
4.
Okay, so it's 4 per year,
Yeah.
it's 12, okay, over the 3 period, thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Brian. So, Brian, actually, Eric was in here the other night on the Community Preservation Act, so you can sort of just briefly touch on that.
Yes, we include this because, as you may remember from last year, there are projects that are eligible for CPA funding that are also that are not eligible for conventional capital funding. That are assets that are not owned by the town, for example. A project having to do with the old Schwab Mill or the Jason Russell House. Those are not town properties, but they are CPA eligible. Those we don't track, but the projects that are CPA eligible that are eligible for conventional capital funding because they would be vetted by a town department or the manager's office and done on town assets. We track those in our plan. In the event that CPA isn't able to fund them for some reason that we know about them and that we can consider funding them. So in some cases, CPA is relieving us of funding those, especially with the parks currently. So that's why they're in our plan. It doesn't imply that we are funding them. It implies that CPA expects to fund them. And you've already heard about them in detail. We've also heard of them in detail and have endorsed, as a committee, have endorsed the CPA committee's recommendations to town meeting.
The next subject is one that we've discussed in the past, and actually we've had some experience in the last year or so of the implementation of this. So, Brian, you want to discuss the bond
Sure.
strategy?
So, for those who may be new to this, bond premium is a tool that's used in bond underwriting to adjust the effective rate of a bond issue to what the market requires, to what the buyers require, while maintaining a nominal rate that's a nice round number. And frankly is what it amounts to, and that fits the funding schedule of the borrower. So it may be the case that the market says that a 5-year bond should be at 2.64%, let's say. The bond is issued nominally at 3%. So the bond holder is going to get a stream of payments at 3% over the life of the bond, and 100% of his money back. In order to do that, the bondholder is willing to pay some money up front to effectively reduce that stream from 3% to 2.6%. That's a premium. So the town sells a bond that has a face value of $100. The bond owner pays 104 point something dollars, whatever the numbers are, that adjust the nominal rate to the true market rate that the market is requiring in order to buy the bond. So it used to be that those premiums, when they happened, as you saw with Sandy's comments about the 5-year plan, they had to go into the general fund. They had to be sort of sequestered somewhere, and we would kind of get credit for them in the plan. You see that on those old premiums. Municipal modernization, when it came into effect, told us effectively to do it right. Figure out what you really need to borrow and borrow that much. So if we needed to borrow $100, but the bondholder was willing to give us $104 instead, we should borrow $96. We should ask for $96 and have them give us $100 if that's what it takes to fund the project that's in the capital plan. That's what municipal modernization calls for. And there's an example here of exactly what happened in last year's bond issue, which is that the capital plan called for $34.5 million worth of funding. The treasurer's office, the treasurer and the assistant treasurer with the bond council determined what the premium was likely to be and adjusted the offering accordingly. So we issued $31 million worth of bonds, face value, and are paying back $31 million and a stream of interest payments. But we received the $34.5 million that we needed to fund the project. So all of that is by way of explaining, A, why there's no bond premium line item in the capital plan for current premiums, other than that little $3,000 that showed up. That was the rounding error. And that tells you what an amazing job the Treasury did in determining what those borrowing amounts should be, because they came within $3,000 of nailing it. So this is partly a way of saying, thank you and kudos to Dean and Mike for doing this exactly the right way.
Yeah, I'd like to add, in the last year or so, Mike and Dean have implemented a new bond schedule. I don't know how many of you are Excel gurus, but there's a feature in Excel called pivot tables that allow you to analyze things from multiple dimensions. And we now have our entire municipal bond schedule on a pivot table, or on an Excel, let's say a flat Excel file, which we can analyze with pivot tables. And it makes a big difference. I mean, I can't tell you, Brian and I struggled for years and years trying to figure out what bonds were active, what weren't, what was school, it was very complicated. Now it's pretty straightforward, thanks to the good work in the Treasurer's Department. Sandy, thank you, Brian. Sandy, town-owned buildings. This is, by the way, a hot topic here at the Finance Committee. So you better be on your toes.
All right. I love talking about town-owned buildings. As you can see from the slide, town owns and operates 7 as rental buildings. 3 of them are under the jurisdiction of the Urban Renewal Fund. So they take in the rent and they pay expenses from that fund. They are the Central School, which is the building right on corner of Academy and Maple, right behind Town Hall, which currently houses the HHS, Health and Human Services Department, and the Senior Center on the first bottom 2 floors, and various other tenants up above, some of which have been there for many years, such as the weatherization program, housing program there, some of which are more relatively new, such as the retirement offices that went in there last year, or in the process of moving in and renovating their own space, Arlington Center for the Arts. The other buildings are the Parmenter School, which again is further down. If you keep going down Academy and take a left down toward the bottom of the hill there, there are a couple of tenants in there, a couple of schools. Their leases expire at June 30th, 2019, and they have options to extend. The Dallin Library, which is where ACMi is. They do not have a current lease, but we are in the midst of negotiating that to renew it. Ryder Street, which is an old kind of rundown place that we rent out to a landscaping company to keep some of their equipment there, and it looks like a place that would have landscaping equipment in it. Gilboa House is a residential house. There's a tenant in it. We do go out to public bid process to set a rent rate for that and so forth. And the Gibbs School, which had been a income-producing property until this year, when we worked with the tenants to move them out. That's why the Arlington Center for the Arts is moving into the Central School, and it is underway to be converted into the 6th grade starting in September. The properties that are not in the Urban Renewal Fund, so Parmenter, Darlin, Ryder, and Mount Gilboa House, the rent from there flows into the general fund, and it's part of our annual reports, our annual budgets. It shows as rental income, and as I said, the other rental income goes into the Urban Renewal Fund. If you look at the next slide, please. This, on the top and the bottom, show two kind of operating statements. The net, profit and loss statement, so to speak, from town-owned buildings. The one up top shows for each building, or in the case of the Urban Renewal, the fund, whether they are making money or losing money each year, including whatever debt service has to be paid. And the bottom is the same analysis, but netting out the capital spending at debt service. And so what you see generally is that we make a profit on these things. It's a significant source of revenue to the town. That is one of the reasons why when some of these buildings come for capital improvements, we include them within the 5% that we spend out of the capital planning committee, because there's no otherwise segregated capital funds for these folks, again, other than the Urban Renewal Fund. They just have to depend on the largest or enlightened self-interest of the capital planning committee looking at maintaining our buildings to deal with their capital needs. The Urban Renewal building, again, that fund is sort of standalone, and it generally has operated in the black, except in FY17 when it lost a major tenant, and so had a significant portion of the upper floors vacant. And in FY18 where there was capital spending there's a conscious decision to draw down some of the fund balance in order to fund some capital spending. In other words, there were some, not just debt service, but one-time expenditures that are within the capital plan. And that you will see going forward. There are other capital, kind of short-term things that they need to do for really significant safety issues that are in the capital plan for the next couple of years going forward. Every year, the Capital Planning Committee asked for this report, and I believe you all have received a copy of this. I think it was emailed to everybody. I didn't bring other paper copies, but this is something that I again have to give, once again, credit to Amy Fidalgo, our management analyst who works in our office, and she spends about half of her time working on our Capital Planning Committee, about half of her time working on for the CPA committee, and about half of her time working for me on budgets. So she does a really good job, I think. Makes all of us look good. So she puts this together and updates it every year, and if you had a chance to look at it, you'll see that there are reports of what is in each of these buildings, what the status is of the leases there, how much revenue we get, and basically what you're seeing on this sheet is a recap of some extensive, multi-year, looking back several years and looking forward several years, analyses of each of these buildings. So I understand that there were some questions about rent at the central school. So I'll cut those questions off the pass, I hope. Answer them. If I did a good job, great. If I didn't, then we'll have some follow-up on it. How's that?
Sounds good.
Okay. So the central school has 2, 4, 6, 8 tenants right now. In looking at the balance of the Urban Renewal Fund, we realized that after the state agency that moved out left, we had a significant drop in revenue. We also had a new tenant, the Arlington Center for the Arts, that was coming in and taking up a lot of that space. But because it's a nonprofit and had a somewhat limited ability to pay market rents, we charged them frankly, a below market rate. I think that was a decision that both the selectmen, in thinking that this was an essential community asset, one that a lot of people use, even though it's a nonprofit, it is part of sort of the cultural civic block idea. And so we set the rent at that level. So if you look at, I did a little analysis, or once again, I have to credit Amy with this. We are charging them about $4.45 square foot for their space. That compares to what in FY18, the Council on Aging or Senior Center, we had budgeted $16,500 for rent there. That's the equivalent of about $11.74 a square foot. Health and Human Services also had $16,500. That's about $10.81. The Arlington Retirement Board, when they took that space, their rent comes out to $19.97. We figured that they could, and they were looking at commercial space around, and their rent was based on what we thought general office space was equivalent to in Arlington. The Arlington Seniors Association, which is affiliated with the Senior Center, pays the equivalent of $10.16 a square foot. Weatherization and Rehab Office is at $9.32, and they have interestingly paid the same rent for many years. I don't think that rent has changed at all. The Schools for Children is up on the second floor. They're paying $15.22 a square foot, and the Mystic River Watershed Association is paying $11.87. So I understand there were questions about how we decided on the amount to put in the budget for the senior center and for HHS. So we kind of came at it two ways. One, we looked at over time ramping that annual amount of rent up to an amount that would keep the Urban Renewal Fund in balance. In other words, get to what we think over time we needed. And so it's $16,500 this year, and in FY18, and then it moves up. You know, I don't know it off the top of my head, but it keeps moving up over the next couple of years. The amount is in the budget that you have, the yellow budget. If you look at each of those departments, the numbers are in there for what we've ramped it up. And so on the one hand, we sort of backed into a number and gradually moved that number up. The second thing was we looked at the fact that the Urban Renewal Fund pays all of the utilities for those buildings. So the Senior Center and HHS have been getting the use of that space and looking at, both as rental space and the infrastructure paying for it, things that we otherwise budget for in other parts of the budget for other departments, whether it's DPW or Town Hall and Facilities Department and so forth. We always budget for those utilities somewhere. We've been hitting the Urban Renewal Fund for all those costs over the years. So we thought that that was sort of an unfair drain on the Urban Renewal Fund to take those costs and never get any income from it. So looking at those things together, we came up with these numbers, and so that's where they came from. And I think it's as pretty much as straightforward as that. If there are questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Carol?
I understand that there's some question as to whether or not the retirement department committee will be able to stay there long-term going forward. When will whomever makes that decision be able to let them know whether they need to go out into the community to find sources? And I understand you may not know the answer to that, but I just wanted that on the record.
So, I mean, those issues apply to all of the tenants in there. We are continually bouncing around and thinking of what ifs for the senior center, for HHS, for the retirement offices, because once we get in there and start doing work, we can sort of seal off those upper floors. But I think the general thinking, and this is not set in stone, but the general thinking is we cannot phase the work on the ground floor and that first floor above it and still hope to have people in the building while significant work is going on. We're going to have to find places for all of those people. Where that is and when that is, we will look to the owner's project manager and the contractor, or the architect, I should say, that has been hired to do the analysis to give us phasing options. It's a significant issue, as it is with any renovation plan, and it's the same sort of things that we have to look at the high school and so forth and so on. I won't speculate publicly at this point about what some of those options might be, because who knows. But I will say that I think we are acutely aware of the needs to protect the people who work and visit those buildings, allow them to have access to the services that are supplied there in a safe place, someplace, at the right time. I hope that answers your question, even though it's a little vague.
David?
Is that what you just described, is that found in, I guess, Exhibit 6, which is senior center renovation, which sums to $1,059,000?
I'm sorry, David, where are you looking?
I'm looking at a 5-year plan, new non-exempt debt service, Exhibit 6.
Ah. So you're actually, where is the debt service for?
Well, how much is the actual cost of what you just described, all these seniors, all these renovations?
It's about $4 million right now is the working estimate.
How much is it supposed to be paid by the Urban Renewal Fund, or?
Well, I think it would be some sort of mix, because frankly, what we're really doing is creating office space. So I think we have not, what I'm hoping is there will be enough revenue from the rent that we're paying so that the Urban Renewal Fund can pay the debt service for what we're doing. But that has not come, we haven't come to a final plan for that yet.
I mean, if I earned $54,000 here in fiscal 15, I couldn't put a $4 million mortgage. Just to put it bluntly, right?
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, it just seems like we need to think, I mean, I'm just asking a question, I don't mean to ask it bluntly, but I would be very concerned that we're spending $4 million if we don't have a plan to pay for it.
Well, we do.
Outside town funding.
Well, it's a town-owned building.
Well, I understand, but if it's supposed to be paid for by revenue, or is it supposed to be paid for by property taxes?
So right now, I think that it was likely that there will be, in one way or another, property taxes will pay for it. That there's not enough, whether that is through a rent payment effectively from the building departments that are there, or whatever. But as Charlie said, it is a town building at some point, and it is not the type of space. You know, if we just rented it out as, you know, converted to Class A office space and rented it out and let it make a profit, we would then still have to find space for those town.
I understand, but
It tends to be a problem. It tends to be
it
a,
seems like a lot.
well, it tends to be an issue that we sort of hit multiple times with capital planning. So the example I think the committee is familiar with is the hockey rink. So the hockey rink is an enterprise fund. It's supposed to be self-sustaining, and it can sustain its operating costs. The revenues fund the operating costs, but it can't then pay for its capital cost. And so there's a portion of the capital cost which the general fund has to subsidize. And I think the challenge here with the urban renewal fund and the properties is sort of what Sandy alluded to. Like, if we're really in the money-making business, we'd just like throw Arlington Center for the Arts out, and we'd throw all these other groups out, and we'd convert it to Class A office space, and we'd do great. But I think you run into I don't want to call it a political struggle, but a government level challenge that you're putting in these nonprofit organizations, quasi-governmental agencies, stuff like that, who the selectmen or whoever has deemed to have other levels of merit. And so to balance it, yes, you end up with this situation where the general fund ends up subsidizing some level of capital improvements.
No, I understand, but it seems like it's not like, it sounds like, well, I mean, I'm new, so I wasn't here when this original plan was approved, but like, what you just described was all safety improvements. I mean, it sounds like most of the capital plan work for this specific building was safety improvements, is that correct?
No,
I think that's a significant upgrade in the quality of the.
Oh, but that's a different story, right? I mean, again, it's like, look, it's a larger conversation, but you kind of get what I'm saying.
Mhm. But you have to remember, this building was formerly a school building.
Yeah, sure.
Right? It was taken over by the town in 1984. I think I sent the report out to the committee.
Oh, yeah, we get lots of those.
Yeah. And so there hasn't been a lot of capital investment in it since then. Just,
No
so-
question. I guess the question, my concern, and it's a larger conversation, but this is a part of it, is there's there's the high school, there's the facilities building. Does it all have, it's a lot. So maybe I'll just pause there.
If I could say one more thing,
Yeah.
Julie. So, without getting into the merits or not of the Urban Renewal Fund, I think a thought exercise might be, let's say there was no Urban Renewal Fund, and we owned this building, and we wanted it to be the kind of senior center and office space that we want to offer to citizens in this community who are of many different ages and many different needs, and I think for many years have said they wanted to see a better senior center. That undoubtedly would just come straight out of the tax base. And so if you just take the urban renewal fund out of it, the fact of the matter is we're making an investment of tax dollars to provide both a much better senior center than we have in response to, I think, a lot of heartfelt needs over the year. And while we're in there, we might as well make that space for HHS more functional, consolidate some of the functions there, and maybe bring the veterans over there too, and so forth, which is part of that department, and really make the whole building work better. So at the end of the day, one way or the other, tax dollars are going to be used to improve that building. And so I think
Okay.
it's just a fair.
I think that we really, okay, Stephen?
Just a quick question, Sandy, on the Arlington Center for the Arts, the lease to be paid at the Central School. How does that compare to what they had been paying at Gibbs?
You know, that is one thing I don't know. It might be in here before, but I don't happen to know that. I can certainly follow up on that. I would just like to add one more thing about that, is that in addition to the rent they're paying, they're making about $1 million of improvements to the building on their dime. So they have a $600,000 fundraising effort, and which I think they're well on the way to achieving. Plus, they've received 2 grants for that work. So they are putting in some gallery space, classrooms, and some studios, all on their own. So I think it will be better space for that work.
Okay, I
Thank you,
think
Cindy.
we need to sort of move along a little bit if we're going to finish at the appropriate hour.
We'll finish. So, thank you, Sandy. The next topic is the Facilities Department and Maintenance. Barbara?
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to say I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to go in and talk to our brand new Stephen Nestorick. I think you can see the information here. His background is fabulous. I think we were really lucky to get him for the town, and he just started on Monday. So I'll have a better report, but in lieu of the report, I did want to just give you, particularly those of you who may be new, and just a refresher, because I am so pleased that the town has a facilities department and is investing in maintenance, because if it weren't investing in maintenance, we would be having a lot more conversations about a higher capital budget. So it's great. When this was started, we kicked it around in capital planning for a number of years. The town set up a maintenance study committee, which I chaired. Christine Dettler was on the committee with me, and as was Ruth Bennett, who was a staff on the town. Ruth Bennett ended up being the new facilities management person, the director of the department. I think she did a great job. There are some things that we were particularly interested in. Getting baseline data on all of the buildings in the town, and she's got general level baseline data on things like HVAC and things like, and buildings on all of the buildings. And when she left last fall, she needed to get more specific information. I think there's a plan for that. We needed a work order system. The work order system is in place. It's based on software. It seems to be working very well. And the third leg of the stool, so to speak, is the preventative maintenance planning that the data will give us over time. So we can say in 2022, that building is going to need a new HVAC system. And we'll know that because we'll get a report saying that, and the department heads will get that. So it's a wonderful system, and I know that Mr. Nestorak, when he comes in and looks at the system, will want to readjust priorities, make some changes, and put his own handprint on it, and he's certainly got the qualifications to do that. So I look forward to working with him.
Thank you, Barbara. I know that you and Christine and others put a lot of work into getting that maintenance department in operation, and I'm glad that it's an ongoing effort by the town. So the next is Parks and Recreation. That's Dean Carmen, Chris Moore, and Dean, Chris.
Yep, I'll start with Parks and Rec. So, as just a quick administrative note, I don't know if anyone noticed it, but in terms of our departmental reorganizations, one thing we did change this year is we changed some of the departments that the different groups in capital planning would be reviewing. And one of the changes was that we took Parks, Recreation, and Rink and put them under one subcommittee, which was probably a nice help for John Marshall, since he didn't have to meet with multiple people. And it's sort of one of those like tiny improvements that goes unnoticed, but I figured I'd at least highlight it so if anybody's comparing reports year over year, they notice that it has slightly changed. So in the worlds of Park, Recreation, and Rink, we have our ongoing multi-year effort for ADA compliance. In a prior year, we talked about this, where the town had done a self-assessment of its ADA compliance at Parks and Fields, and it's endeavoring to make upgrades at a pace of about $50,000 per year. So the improvements at Florence are complete. Robbins Farm is in progress. Buck Hill / Hills Hill and Lock are scheduled for the upcoming spring, fall, spring cycles, and then the rec department will continue to chip away at the list thereafter. In the current year requests, I think it falls under schools, but it's definitely a recreation asset because it's used for both the schools and the community at large. We'll have the 2 Hardy School projects that are going to be teed up, the playground in the back of the school, or on one side of the school, and then the playground that's going to be installed on the other side of the school. And then that last section I have for future requests, a lot of that, significant amount of that has overlap with CPA. So as we've talked about in the past, the item goes on the capital plan. If the CPA committee chooses not to pick it up or look at it for possible funding, it stays on the capital plan. If they choose to pick it up, it goes to theirs. But on the items that are staying most likely with the capital plan, the first item is $2 million for the reservoir. Reservoir master plan was really for funding the project that would be the result of the master planning project. The next 3, Herd Mill and Wellington, are eligible for CPA. I'm sure I talked about that the other day. Bishop Playground is the next item. If everyone's been over to Bishop, there are 2 playgrounds on the site. One I think is a blue one. It looks really nice. The other one's kind of a reddish one. It doesn't look very nice. It's more behind the baseball field. That's the park that we're talking about improving, swapping out, changing right there. And then the rink roof is another project that's going to be in the capital plan. So the rink, the enterprise fund that we've talked about, and then as you probably recall, as part of our agreement with, I'm going to call it MDC, but it's not MDC, DCR. As part of our agreement with DCR, we have to make a certain level of capital improvements to the rink on a periodic schedule, and it's up. This item here is up for improvement. Now, frankly, even if it wasn't on the schedule, we would be improving it because, if we don't swap this roof out, which is quite old, it's going to start leaking and water's going to be pouring in, and really bad things would happen. So that's going to be done, hopefully scheduled for 2021. And then the last item is Poets Corner, which is also a CPA project or eligible project.
Thank you, Dean. Chris? Any questions? Excuse me, Chris. Any questions on it?
I have a question.
John?
In that Mary Margaret and I have the rec and rink with subcommittee. Do you all think that the fees and things that are charged right now are appropriate? In reviewing and talking with John, it seems to me that all the things that are done are really popular. And I don't want to gouge anybody, but I'm just asking for an opinion as to whether or not maybe we ought to think about increasing the fees and things and decreasing to some extent the capital. People have opinions about that?
No, you asking Dean?
Well, whoever.
Dean, did you have a comment on that?
Dean, maybe to start, but
The rec and rink fees?
well.
Or the rec fees or the rink fees or what?
Well, the rink fees, for example, they might be able to push it a little bit more on the state to get those fees up, for example. And even the recreation fees, I look at that book and those look like a pretty good bargain to me. And I'm just wondering, I don't want to gouge anybody, but I'm just thinking that, maybe some money can be saved because of the capital plan.
Yeah, so I will say on the rec side, my understanding talking to John is that he is looking, the town does charge the various sports user groups a fee per player, and I think it's about $10 right now per season that they're in operation. I know he's looking at increasing that in the fall, so I think that's there. And that's a fee that I think was implemented in like the mid to early 2000s, never adjusted past $10. I think on the hockey, on the rink side, I think he has been trying to increase it ratably and steadily over a sustained period of time. I think it goes up like, I forget what it is, like 3% or something every other year. I don't think he's allowed to increase it annually.
There's a max that we can charge if it doesn't lose
Yeah.
it.
So let's not, I'd like to not get diverted on that subject. This really is, town manager's responsibility. And, if he doesn't raise the fees, the money has to come out of other town expenditures. So there's sort of a governor or a motivating engine on that. So
Yeah, one thing I will say though about the rink, just so we're talking about, is the reason we put it in a, no, it's important. The reason we put the project in 2021, because if you look at last year's capital plan, it wasn't there, and all of a sudden it's accelerating up, is because there's another project that's falling off at that point in time. And so what that does to put the 350 there is as one 10-year expense comes off, this comes on, and it will at least try to level off the capital spending, so it's not subsidized much by the
thank you,
town.
Dean. Chris?
Okay, in the interest of speed, I will not focus on the work crane. It's not as cool as the fire truck anyway.
But it's taller.
It's taller, it's true. And useful for other things. I think, thinking about the public works budget, there's a constant flow of various kinds of rolling stock that are meeting their end of life, and Mr. Rademacher does, I think, a good job of tracking it, especially as it gets close to that, to figure out, is it an early replacement, can we keep it a little longer? So part of the story of the DPW budget is just keeping our ability to get work done using that rolling stock active. I think, we already talked a little bit about road work. There's about $500,000 on sidewalks as well that are just happening every year, about $60,000 on signals. So those things are happening all the time. The bigger projects, I think they're worth a little of your time right now, are the bridge, which we talked about, the Mystic Street Bridge, but also the DPW facility renovation, which is coming up. The study work on that is happening right now. We should have a preliminary design in the early summer. But right now we're thinking of that as a $20 million project. And the estimate is that about 35% of that building is related to water and sewer, and so that we could use enterprise funds to cover about 35% of that project. So that would be 13 on the town and 7 from the enterprise fund. And the enterprise fund is well funded to absorb that expense at this point. The problems at that site are manyfold. Pretty much everything about the building envelopes needs work. The bricks, the masonry capstones over the windows and the garage doors, the windows and doors themselves, the roofs are leaking, etc. So there's a lot of exterior work there. There are also fire, plumbing, HVAC, electrical, all the kinds of things you might imagine in a building that hasn't seen a lot of love in a while. And there's also some ways in which the building doesn't really serve its users very well. There's missing office space that's currently handled by sharing offices off-site and other things like that. So there's a variety of things that'll happen when that work is done, but it's quite extensive.
Brian?
Where did the figure 35% for the water and sewer come from?
That came from Mr. Rademacher's estimate of what would be appropriate, but we don't really know what that number is until we see what the work is that we eventually decide to do. So yeah, it's definitely an estimate at this point. Yeah.
Is there any interaction between those plans and the high school plans, or is there a strict wall between them? In other words, is there any?
So literally 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting with the architectural teams from both projects to look at how space might be shared, or so there are various things that are in the high school right now, such as the facilities department, that MSBA won't reimburse us for doing any space work on that. So If it's just going to be straight town dollars, the question is, would it make sense to keep them in the high school building, or as part of the DPW, move them over there? So we charged, or Adam Chaplain charged the architects from both teams to look at that, to talk together, to continue to meet, and give us some options about what if we move this one or that one out off-site from the high school over to the DPW. And so we're in the midst of looking at those things.
Would there be any adjustment of the border between the line between the two properties?
I think the one area that they're looking at for expanding DPW would be sort of that, part of that practice field or whatever that's right behind the Stop and Shop.
Yeah, right.
So in that area, part of the challenge of using that area is that might be an area, if we have to go to modulars for the high school, that would be a logical place to put modulars. So as you can tell, there's a lot of what ifs,
Right.
and we don't have answers yet.
I'm very glad to hear that they're talking. That's good.
Absolutely.
Peter?
Where is the bridge over Mystic River? Is it on Medford Street? Is it that
Mystic
one or
Street.
somewhere else?
It's Mystic Street.
Right out here.
Captain Cook, right out here.
Cook's Hollow, right underneath.
We probably went over it on the way here.
What are you pointing at?
Right next to
Up-
the,
up- yeah, it just- we have Mill Brook runs under Mystic Street.
Oh, okay, I'm with it now, thank you.
okay, thank you very much, Chris. Brian, can you give us a brief update on the status of the high school project?
Yes, the building committee is in the throes of the process, having hired the project manager and the design team with the MSBA's consent. You do nothing without the MSBA in this process. The process that we're in right now is very much a public participation process. There's a series of public meetings going on that when you see them announced, if you can attend, I'd encourage you to. There is an informational website that's excellent. The URL is here. Take a look at it. The phase that the process is in is determining what the educational requirements are for square footages of space. There's a design document that has to go to the MSBA in May, that when you say design, people think of pictures. No, it's a spreadsheet, essentially, that enumerates all of the educational space requirements and all of the square footages associated with them, which MSBA in some cases allows, in some cases doesn't, in some cases allows less than we would like. So there's a very much a negotiation process that's going to ensue with them. The timeline remains that we'll complete feasibility and schematic design to a point where a debt exclusion will be possible sometime in the summer of mid-2019, middle of next year.
David?
Actually, can we go back to the public works? The building. Will there be any full-time staff added, staffing when the building is complete?
I'm not aware of anything tied to the building.
Not particularly, no.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be surprising if the town over time hired more staff, but I don't think there's anything tied to the building. Do you have something in particular in mind?
No, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Like, just wondering if, like, were there any, like, is there, so there'll be no staff or any sort of major additional expenses which are required if the building is entered into, built, constructed?
Not to my knowledge.
Expense budget.
It's not normally what we consider at the capital planning committee. People.
So, exactly, sorry.
Bill?
Quick question on the expected reimbursement by MSBA of 40% of eligible costs. And since the project itself is going to run upwards of $200 million, can you give me an example of what an eligible cost would be, and if there's some way that the architect or going through the process at this stage could enhance the type of items that would be reimbursed by MSBA?
Yes, there's there are items that are very clearly ineligible according to the MSBA. Anything that isn't directly associated with the educational process. So all of the school administrative staff that's housed in the high school currently, all of the functions that Sandy referred to earlier that are housed in the high school, none of those, if we need to build space for them in the high school, would be reimbursable by MSBA. On a more finely grained level, there are MSBA guidelines as to based on a student population, first of all, and then based on the requirements of a particular kind of classroom or a particular educational program, how many square feet is allowable for that classroom. Then there are total requirements, total allowable square footages, when you add all of those little items up, that are based on the population of the high school. There's some give and take between those two. Apparently there is some latitude in getting the MSBA to go up on particular line items if you've done well on the total. It's a negotiation process that the architects and the owner's project manager have experience with. It's a foreign language to the rest of us. I mean, we're learning from them how to approach this process. We are just now, in the next 2 weeks, the school committee is going to be taking a vote on that spreadsheet that I referred to, that begins the negotiation process with them. So exactly the kinds of things that you're asking about is precisely what's going on right now between the architects, the principal, the committee, the building committee, and the school committee, and the staff of the high school, the professional staff, the faculty, to maximize our chances of doing the best we can with MSBA on reimbursement and get the space that we think is needed for each educational component.
Thanks, Brian. Alan?
The $200 million, is that an old number or really good news?
That's the same number we showed you last year, and we don't have sufficient information to change it.
Because all the numbers I've heard are much higher than that, so
Yeah.
maybe that's good news.
Yes, that is the best number that we are authorized to
Carol?
talk about at the moment.
60% of the IT budget, the total IT budget is school related. So does that mean that any of the IT administrative can be housed in the school building or no?
No.
It can be housed there, but MSBA can pay for it.
Oh, right. Anything could be housed there.
Yeah.
Okay, any other?
Shelley? Just a quick question from, when will they start getting down to the questions of what are they building, where are they building it, is it going to be a new building, is it going to be a renovation, those types of issues?
Those alternatives, the architects are required to develop several alternatives. One that may be all new construction, one that we're required to develop an alternative that entertains a different location. In Arlington's case, that's a fairly easy alternative to develop. It has no potential. But the alternatives that will be developed that will include a partial renovation and rebuild or a complete tear down, if that's even feasible, those will be developed this fall, winter, and taken to the MSBA for a decision that gets us to the completion of feasibility and into schematic design next year.
Will there be public feedback on those issues
Every
also?
step of the way.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Carolyn?
So the high school sits on a floodplain over Mill Mystic, which river is it?
Millbrook.
Millbrook.
Millbrook. The state won't pay for any of the work needed to do to shore up that if we change where the building is located?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, thanks, Brian. The next subject is just an update on the various elementary school projects. We've had 4 of them underway. Barbara?
No, in the hope that maybe there's an award for, like at the Oscars, for getting through the fastest, I'm going to just skim right through this. Stratton and Thompson are done, and the Stratton people will move in the middle, at the start of the next school year. Thompson moved in November. The Gibbs is ongoing, and the move-in is for fall 2018. And the Hardy School is in pre-construction right now. The contract is in progress, and the move-in date is going to be next December of 2018.
Great. Thank you, Barbara. You did get the award.
Jet ski.
Okay, Dean, the next subject is the rescinding prior debt. I'm sorry, John. Yep.
Sorry. There was at one point talk of imposing performance penalties on the contractors for the delay. on the Thompson. Any update on whether, what the status
Probably
of that is?
Sandy, you
And
can-
Yeah.
If there are penalties paid, does that just flow back into the capital budget, or
Gonna
where does that
defer to
money go?
Sandy.
Sandy, please.
I know there were discussions. I am not conversant with where those stand right now. Any reimbursement, I think, would go back into the fund where it came out of, which was capital, so we could then use it. It would be essentially a turn back, I believe. Now, the only question I would have is if, for some reason, state finance law has some quirk that says when you have a settlement, it has to be treated as general fund income. I don't happen to know that because it's such a rare occurrence that it happens that I have never really dealt with it, so I don't know.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. And thank you, Sandy. So Dean,
Oh, Mike.
Mike, sorry.
That's okay. So every year we take a look at authorized but unissued debt. This year there's 6 such authorizations for which the project is complete, but they had alternative funding sources than the authorization at town meeting. For example, the 2017 departmental equipment, that was an ambulance last year. We initially thought we were going to borrow the funds. We ended up using cash for it, so we no longer need to borrow those funds, so we have to rescind it to increase our debt limit. And so we just ask for your approval in these 6 projects to rescind the authorization.
So this is not, doesn't cost the town any money to rescind these. This is just to give us more flexibility in future debt. Thank you, Mike. Yes.
What's the total amount of the non-exempt debt outstanding?
The non-exempt debt
The
outstanding.
total debt base.
I don't have that information. Do you have that information in your computer there? Okay, well, you're looking that up. We'll come back. Okay. We have it somewhere, but it's not, it's in a file. We normally report it in the capital report that we give to town meeting. So the next subject, actually, this is somewhat of a logistical conflict here because I was going to ask Brian to speak about this. But there is an article in the town warrant to expand the capital planning committee by 2 citizen members. And this is, the draft language is, for the vote is shown on slide 31 on page 16. And Brian, are you prepared to?
I can talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I can't do is get on the line.
That's all right, you can come back to that.
Find the data.
I'll do the next one.
Okay. So we had a vacancy on the committee this year. When we set out to interview for the position, we had a number of good candidates. And it occurred to us that, especially at times like now, when there are a number of large capital projects happening, including the high school movement, that enlarging the committee would be helpful. And so what we propose to do in talking with the moderator, who is the appointing authority, and the manager, whose budget technically the capital plan is, we agreed that we would like the ability to be able to enlarge the committee during times like this, and then allow it to shrink to its current size if there are years when it's not necessary to fill those positions. And sometimes it is challenging to fill open positions. So this will give us more capacity to get the job done, easier job spreading the subcommittee work among the citizen, that is non-staff members of the committee. Some more institutional memory as people transition off of the committee. Having only 4 citizen members is a kind of shallow bench, and so we'd be enlarging that to 6. And at the same time, we'd be correcting a glitch in the terms of the capital planning committee, which technically they all expire at the same time currently. So this will enable us to have them be staggered. So that's what this does, that at the request of the chair and the manager, that the moderator will appoint up to 2 additional members. We have asked Joe Barr, who's here tonight, and Timur Yantar, who's not able to be here tonight, to work with us this year as what we've called advisors, with the idea that if this bylaw passes, they would be appointed to the committee, along with Chris, who was newly appointed this year to the position that was already vacant. So that's what this bylaw accomplishes, and we're asking for your support of it.
Thank you, Brian. So we do look forward to your support at town meeting on that article. On slide 32, this is somewhat perfunctory, or not perfunctory, that's the wrong words. This is to sort of meet a legal requirement. On slide 32, we show you all the items that are going to that will be voted in the article, which is, as you recall, the capital article is fairly long and has a complex structure to it. But this lists principally that we are asking for a cash amount of 2.7 and 2.8 million, bond of 5.275 million, other authorization to expend from other accounts of 3.615 million. That's the basic expenditure levels. But the vote will also include debt service, both for exempt and non-exempt debt. And all of those items are listed in that table on the right-hand side. They will show up in the formal vote that's in the town warrant, which actually, when it goes before town meeting, is a recommendation of the Finance Committee. And they'll show up in the vote in several different parts. But we included in this table because the information is there in a summary fashion for you to see as we develop the finance report for town meeting. As a note here, 1.3 million of the bonded appropriation that's in the 5-year plan has already been voted at the special town meeting, and it's accounted for in the 5-year plan. As I mentioned earlier, there are 3 attachments here: the actual fiscal year 2019 proposed capital budget, the 5-year plan fiscal year 2019 to 23, and included in that plan is the assumed forecast of new debt service should the capital budget be voted and the capital plan adopted. So, Brian, do you have any luck there? Okay. We'll probably have to get back to you on that, Brian.
Okay.
Okay.
You want me to just tell them?
You have it?
Yep.
Oh, sorry. We have the treasurer here, of course.
Yeah, so if we look at, Brian, I'm gonna give you June 30, 2017, because I can't, because I'm just gonna look at the CAFR, which is not out yet, but we have a copy of. So total bonds payable at June 30, 2017 is 71,117,000, and then that doesn't include the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund, which had outstanding balance of 8168.
Thank you.
Yep, and then if you really want to know some interesting stuff, the unauthorized debt, which you would probably ask me at some point, was, we were authorized but unissued is $64 million, but most of that is the schools, so Gibbs, Hardy, and Thompson make up.
And that's authorized but not issued yet.
Yeah, and that, the reason I bring that 64 up is 34.5 of it is what's in the slide as being issued in December.
Last December.
December of 17.
Right.
Fiscal year ended June 30 and then December.
Would you happen to know roughly the life of those bonds, just in general?
Which ones?
Regards, not the remaining, the 71 million, would that be not the remaining life on it, the life when they were taken out, just in general, or is it all over the place?
The oldest bonds are general obligation bonds from 2005, and then it's just sort of ratable from, they're small. And then they ramp up, like the Sims bond, which is 2.9 million, that's still out there. 2010, there's $5 million, and then it really picks up steam in 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. And then as you'd expect, the latest round, which was 17, was 15 million.
What's the life of it?
The mean life's probably about 15 years.
Okay, then,
Less.
thank you.
Less.
Yeah, so I think if on the existing borrowing at June 30, 17, I think, what was it, Mike, 79.9% of some godforsaking number is scheduled to be paid off within 10 years. So 80% of those bonds are scheduled to be paid off within 10 years.
So how about the big projects? Like, how long did the Gibbs go? 20 years?
Yeah.
Is that from the audit?
Yeah.
Okay. Brian, all the audits where he's pulling those numbers are all online on the town
Okay,
website.
it was just in the context of what we were talking about.
John?
Thank you, Charlie. On slide 32, you're asking for a total of 11.7 approximately. Can you just reconcile that to the number on slide 30, which is the total non-exempt tax burden?
It's, well, the reconciliation is, so, okay, let me explain it this way. The cash we're going to spend, if you go to slide 32,
Right,
we're going to
that's the same-
spend
That's the same number.
2.7 million.
Yeah.
The other is an authorization to spend money from various funds, and it's more or less going to be cash, grants, water, sewer, et cetera, okay? But it doesn't come off the taxes. It's sort of, call it off balance sheet, if you will.
Okay.
The bond is an authorization. It's not an expenditure. The only amount from the bond, you see under fiscal year 2019, it says new non-exempt debt service.
Okay, so the debt service
That
is
99,313 is from that number. It's half of the interest rate for the first year, which is normally what we get hit with. Okay?
Gotcha.
All right, good. So, I think that sort of covers the presentation this evening. Thank you very much, team, for your great presentations. What we're asking for tonight from the Finance Committee is to vote favorable action on our recommended budget for fiscal year 2019. Your support for our 5-year plan. An item that we ask for every year is to transfer $10,000 from the perpetual care cemetery budget to the capital budget. That goes into the other category. To support the treasurer's debt rescission article, which Mike just described to you on an earlier slide, and to support the Capital Planning Committee expansion article. Thank you very much for your patience.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Yes.
Nope, just got to get into voting. So, thank you very much. Your work is tremendous. It's been that way for years, and we thank you very much for it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I believe we could stay.
Okay, so tonight, I'd like to go through and vote each of the articles. So why don't we start with page 14. Gotta get Charlie back here. Sandy, check and see if Charlie's coming back. Okay. Okay, so we've got on page 14, we've got rescinding prior debt votes. That should be a fairly straightforward one. And then on page 16, we've got the expansion, which they've asked us to take action on. And then the big one is the bottom on 16, which is the recommended vote on this. So as soon as Charlie gets back in, we'll start the discussions. Well, let's start on the page 14, rescission prior debt. So this is, as they said, was debt that has been authorized, has not actually been borrowed, either short-term or long-term, and is not needed for one reason or another. Are there any questions on this? So this basically, takes it off the ledger, so it doesn't look like we need to borrow more money than we really need to.
Those that we set the table as printed.
Okay. Is there any other questions on this? Okay. All those in favor of accepting the rescission recommendations of the Capital Budget Committee, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So.
We've got an eye from behind you as well.
Ah. Okay. Good. Favorable action. Unanimous. 3-4-18. Liz, take a look at this and plug it into that little chart that we have in the Finance Committee report. Okay, going to 16. Now, this is Article 4. So normally this is a selectman's article. It sounds like they want to add 2 people at their option and also reorient the appointment so that the terms end on a staggered basis. Are there any questions on this? Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
This
You
is to
need-
support the Board of Selectmen?
Yeah, this will be, Liz, so you need to put Article 4 back in to the FinCom report. And why don't we have this? This is to support the positive recommendation of the Board of Selectmen. Okay, so that's 314-18. Okay, Charlie, we just unanimously supported the rescission vote and the expansion of, under Article 4 vote. Do you know if the Board of Selectmen have taken a position on that?
I believe they have. I think they supported it.
Okay, so we're going to just support the Board of Selectmen's recommendation.
Okay, yes.
Since they'll be the main sponsor. But we'll put that in the FinCom report. Okay, now the big one. So, the main point is the first 4 lines. So we're doing cash of $2,797,027. This will be bigger print when you get to the Finance Committee report.
It's all, yeah, but these numbers are all in these sheets, the appendices, in
Yep.
bigger print.
And then it goes through sort of line by line, exempt, non-exempt, et cetera. Questions? Discussion? Everybody understands it?
Charlie, the 5.3 million for the bond, that's authorization.
Yes, that's an authorization. In other words, that says that the town, that there's, in this, this is a test on my report here, but if you look on, yeah, okay. If you look on this, just wanted to check to see if it was there. If you look on the Exhibit 1, all right, in the backup, on the second page in the left-hand column, the sum is $5,275,000. Okay, so all those items in that column are the items that will be acquired during fiscal year 2019, but will be borrowed for. The total amount of the cost of that will hit the 2019 budget is $99,000 and something. It's 1/2 of the interest rate for the first year.
Other questions? Leave it open for a minute. People go through it. David?
We already authorized the 1.3, right, in the school section?
Yes, we did, and the town meeting voted it in the February town meeting.
That was it.
So is it proper to revote it?
No, it's just, it's in the plan. We don't have to revote it, but it's in the plan.
Basically, your vote will be to accept the way it is laid out here, but technically, the new authorizations are those 3 lines at the top. The cash, the bond authorization, and the other. So if you remember back from our Finance Committee report, the whole cash item plus debt service was the first section. The other, which is water, sewer, revolving funds, things like that, is the second part. And the third part is all the bond authorizations, which would be the $5,275,000. Okay, other questions? David?
What are we doing at town? Sorry, this didn't come in last time. What's the 100,000 for town hall?
There's an ongoing reconstruction project in Town Hall. It started a number of years ago. We put the new elevator in, the whole whole range of things that get done every year.
Okay, other questions?
I still don't understand. If you got 1.3 million in this one, and you had another one, 1.3 million a month ago, why it isn't 2.6 million total authorization? For the Hardy School.
The first part of the Hardy School was authorized last spring, if I remember correctly.
No, I see Peter's question here.
Okay.
I don't mean to nitpick, but.
No, that's not a nitpick, actually. It's a, let me just check something. You voted it. Yeah, so, yeah, I think the appropriate thing to do would be to take the 1.3 million out of the 5275, because it was authorized at the special town meeting. So, so that's 3.975, is that right? That's right.
3,975,000?
Yeah.
Okay. So that 5,275 included the 1,000,003.
Right.
Okay.
But you're still authorizing the debt service, you know, whatever portion of that shows up in the debt service in the total expenditure for this year. So if we make it clear in the vote that we're not reauthorizing 1.3 million. Okay.
You could put another line that says 1.3 million, then
Well,
parentheses.
it says on page 32.
Yeah.
So the new authorization is 3,975 million. And I don't know how to express it, but we also have to, the debt service for the 1.3 million is also in the recommended vote in the 99,000. It's in the 99,000 number for the new debt service in this year.
We didn't vote the debt service.
We didn't vote the debt service.
Only the authorization.
Only the authorization, that's right.
Okay. Good catch.
So we'll appropriately correct that in the report to town meeting.
Okay, other questions? David?
Just second page. I mean, this is a nitpick, but.
The second page of which?
Oh, sorry, the same exhibit, we're referring to exhibit 1.
Yes.
And the redevelopment board, security cameras, are those acting at the central school, or is that? What's security camera? Is that like at the senior center or something?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, additional questions? Okay, do I have a motion on the, I'm sorry, is there additional questions? No. Do I have a motion, David?
Sorry, one more. But this is at the same senior center that we're going to spend the $4 million to upgrade in a year or two. We're going to put security cameras in for the next year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Doesn't take away the need for security now.
At the third floor of a. Okay.
I would
I'm just
expect
wondering if
the
it's
security-
capital at that point.
No, it says second floor to the lower level. It's for the whole.
I would expect the new cameras to be reusable. no matter what.
Okay, as long as it's capital, I mean, we can truly use them again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, additional questions, John?
Well, given that this 1.3 million was previously authorized, what's the proper vote that we should take right now?
3975. In other words, on this recommended vote, the second line item should be 3,975,000.
So just
So then are
cross
we
out
dropping
5275 and substitute 3975.
But then we're not dropping the total because it's part of the debt service still?
No, the total is 10,385,000.
But the rest of it below is correct and including. Okay, additional questions? Okay, so the top line is 2,795,027, that's cash. The bonding line is 3,975,000, that's an authorization. The other, which is essentially cash, is 3,625,000.
No, 615.
Oh, you're right, 3,615,000 for a total authorization of 10,385,027.
Yes. And I would like to make a clarifying comment here. I misspoke myself before. On page 2 of the report, that 5,275,000 has to stay there because that is part of the fiscal year 2019 capital budget. It's just that we've already voted a portion of it. So the total capital budget for, as presented here, including the CPA and the other, et cetera, is 12,888,050 as shown on page 2 of Exhibit 1. But on page 16 of the handout, there's a correction.
Okay, additional questions? Make sure everybody understands. Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
And second. Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion on approval of the capital budget? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
thank you for your work.
Thank you, Charlie.
1418. Okay.
Charlie, on the last page here, you also asked for a transfer 10,000 from perpetual care to capital budget. Have we already done that?
No, we haven't voted that yet, actually. Good point, John.
Okay, I'm sorry, which page?
The $10,000 from the perpetual transfer.
Oh,
That's a warrant article.
okay, that's from the funds in cemetery?
Yes.
Okay, so transfer, and that's going to for headstone cleaning? Do you remember what it's for?
Yeah, for headstone cleaning and other maintenance, yes.
And repair, okay. And that's $10,000.
Yes.
Okay, Christine, do you have what the transfer is needed for the cemetery commissioners?
150,000. 150,000.
150,000. Okay, so this is Article 47, that the town transfers 150,000 to the cemetery commissioners for the care of town cemeteries and $10,000 to the capital budget for headstone cleaning and repair, sums to be taken from the perpetual care fund. Okay, so that's that article. Might as well get rid of the whole thing. Is there any questions on that? We have the perpetual care fund, which is usually around $4 or $5 million, and then we've got.
6.9.
I'm sorry.
6.9.
That's why I hired her. And how much for the, what's the other?
Watson Graves, $498,997.29.
Okay, once more, 489,000.
498,997.39.
And the perpetual care?
Perpetual care is $6,905,769.68.
And that's as of?
February 27th, I think.
27.
2 weeks ago.
18. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so that is the vote under Article 47. Do I have any questions? Okay, so it's been moved, seconded? Moved and seconded.
You want to
Again,
say those numbers again?
town transfers $150,000 to the cemetery commissioners for the care of town cemeteries, and $10,000 to the capital budget for headstone cleaning and repair, said funds to be taken from the perpetual care fund. Any questions? Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, unanimous. 31418. Okay, great, thank you. Got another one of those. Okay, we've got, anybody have any short budgets?
I have answers to questions.
Okay. On the rec and rink, I assume?
Well, the answer to that is Sandy and John will need to do a cross match so that we can look at how it was done before and how it's done now. What's the difference? So that's one thing. So one of the questions was, is the method that we use to deal with the rodents approved? And it's approved at the federal level, at the state level, and our inspectors were sent to school to take a class.
And we think it's a good idea too.
Let's see. Christine's going to redo this chart. For the FY18, the spreadsheet was correct, but the pie chart needs to be fixed. And you had asked about why there's no state funding. It's not that there's no state funding, but the decision was made since it's capricious. They don't know what the exact number is. They're leaving it blank. And also, the grants come in at different times of the year. So you can look and see what they got last year, and when she gets the money in, then we'll know what the amount is for that. I think that was all the questions.
Okay, so can we do the rink?
No, because the rink and the rink are the same problem, where the
Oh.
stuff was taken out of reserve funds and put into the enterprise funds, and you wanted to do an apples-to-apples comparison, so Sandy and John are going to have to redo the budget.
Okay. If they can get it and email it to the committee, email it to Liz, and she'll send it out to the committee, just so we have some time to look at it.
Right.
Take a couple aspirin, for the headache, and, try to understand it. So if that could be done, that'd be great. Okay, does anybody have any other budgets?
How about the ARB?
ARB? Okay. That is page
79, 78. No change from last year. Numbers are reasonable compared to actuals.
Okay, so on page 78 is the redevelopment board, 10,800.
Now, also, the rental properties that are on the general fund are part of this. They are technically, I guess, redevelopment board properties. And there's just two now. It used to be the kids, but now it's just the Parmeter and the Dallin Library.
What's otherwise unclassified? under the redevelopment board?
Don't know.
Is it supplies?
Printing ballots, office supplies, advertising. Sort of goes up and down rather drastically.
The actual figures.
Yeah.
Those usually have, dependent on end of year.
Okay. We can go ahead and vote this budget, but could you just check with them and find out? I mean, it's, usually I don't care too much, but it's 25% of the budget, so. Okay, is there any questions on the redevelopment board?
I move to 10,800.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of 10,800, please say aye.
Aye.
The rental
Opposed?
properties on page.
Oh, just a minute, got to finish the vote. All those opposed? Okay. Unanimous? An old moderator who used to be in Arlington named Larry Cochran used to move the town meeting along very well because he kept forgetting to call for the no votes. And it was amazing how fast we could go through stuff if you don't do that. Okay, rental properties. So you basically just have these two now.
$5,000.
So moved.
Well, is it 15 plus 5, so it'd be 20,000 for the two, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay. And,
It's down below is the
right. Okay, do I have a motion for the 20,000?
So moved. Second.
Okay, any questions? Making a nice profit on those. Until the roof, yeah, until the roof goes. Okay, any questions on the rental properties? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so, yep. Favorable action, unanimous. 314. Any others, Peter?
That's it.
Okay. Okay, now, the schedule, we just have 2 more weeks left. I'd like to get a lot of done on Monday. We have 7:30, Rich Greco is coming to discuss the pension articles. 43 and 44 are standard articles that we vote each year, but 27 is a new one. And so I have to have that. And after that, I'd like to go through and really get a lot of votes done. So, Grant, do you think you'll have water sewer by then?
Possibly.
Okay, Christine?
Possibly.
Okay. So water sewer, try to get those. This next time is the school budget. Liz, see if you can get some more chairs. Sometimes they have a huge, large crowd, and sometimes not very many people come at all. I'm trying to think of the rest of the budgets that we need, but insurance, retirement.
Assessor and insurance meeting Monday for assessor and next Friday for insurance. So they're both in the morning, so hopefully we can.
Okay, so possibly next Monday.
Right.
Okay,
And
and we have.
And I have the treasurer marking the postage. I was going to do it, but I don't know if you want to do it in 5 minutes.
Okay, and like I said, the week after, we have some spare time, but it'd be nice if we only have to use one of those days instead of both of them to get that done. And then the reserve fund, trying to remember who, you do that. Okay, so you have a recommendation. What are we doing, 1% or 1.5%, I think? 1%, I think. What was last?
Over 1.5. They can never have it up in reserve.
That's right. Okay, is there any other business? Oh, Mary
I
Margaret?
found another question and answer. And the question was, how much does the gala bring in? $25,000.
How much does the?
25,000. The gala for the AYCC.
Oh, the gala, right, okay, that's good. Any other business before? Okay, meeting adjourned. Now, Charlie, you going for 2 weeks? Oh, 27th is a Tuesday, actually. But I might. Okay, 28th then.